Okay, let's make a start. First of all, welcome to members of the committee, officers and the press and headers in the public gallery. Just to remind everybody that this meeting is being webcast, and what we'll also do is just quickly outline the emergency evacuation procedure. We are not expecting a fire alarm, so if in the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area and the main front door of City Hall, turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. Okay, agenda item 2 is for absence and substitutions. Ian, do we have any substitutions?
Yeah, we have apologies from Councillor Tom Renhard and Councillor Ellie King and Councillor Kelvin Blake and Councillor Tom Blenkinsop are substituting.
Thank you, and we've also had apologies from Paul Martin, the Chief Executive. And everyone else I can see is present and correct. Agenda item number 3 is declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. I'd like to move the minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on the 15th of July as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Caroline. Are there any, is the committee happy to confirm the minutes as a correct record? Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 5 is Chair's announcements. I do not have any Chair's announcements at this point, but I will speak when we cover the statement for P3. So that takes us on to agenda item number 6, which is public forum. We have had 7 questions into public forum. I can see Dan Aykroyd is in the public gallery. Dan, your first question should have been referred to the Housing and Homes Delivery Committee. But your third question you've received a response to. Do you have a follow-up question for that?
Yeah, so the question was about the formatting of the reports, particularly the CRR risk reports. Currently, the officer's answer isn't particularly clear to me, but basically my question is for the committee: should the reports be changed so that people can see the original due dates, the previous due dates and the current due dates and percentage completion, so that people can see when things like making homes comply with fire safety regulations, when that gets pushed back from August this year to August 2026, people can actually see that that item's been pushed back, and we can actually have a conversation about it rather than it being a tiny detail in a report.
Okay, Dan. Well, the question is for the committee, but as we have 2 substitute members of the committee, so it's not really fair on them to respond to a question about the general observation of the committee. If you would want to email that in the same detail to me, I'm happy to provide.
Sure. Sure, that sounds good.
And then I'll pass it on to the committee members and they can respond if they wish to do so.
Cool.
Thank you. Well, now all the other questions have received a written response. If I was you, Dan, I won't give away the microphone yet because we're now moving on to public forum statements. We have 2 statements. The statements have been read by members of the public, but Dan, do you want to quickly speak to your statement?
Yeah, I was really, really shocked that the scale of the problems that the council faces in complying with the fire safety regulations were kept hidden from councillors and the public until after the elections. The budget is, to some extent, a work of fiction or fraud. This country is being governed appallingly badly, and it's putting us in a situation where propaganda is leading to violence, as it's a lot easier to blame certain ethnic groups than to explain the structural failings of a bureaucracy that seems to not care about keeping people's homes safe or staying within the bounds of the law. elected politicians need to start using their power to quickly change and improve the system they find themselves operating in, not just hoping that they do a bit better in the next set of elections. Thanks.
That's the end of public forum. We'll now move on to the main agenda item, which is the Period 3 Finance Outturn report for 24-25. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Tim Whippington to the committee. Kelvin did tell me you were going to be a bit late. Before I hand over to Tony Kirkham, I just wanted to say a few things ahead of this. The financial challenge we face as a local authority has been subject to much coverage and discussion over many years. Increasing demand, allied with high inflation, has driven up costs and continues to drive up costs. Meanwhile, the resources available to respond are stretched thinner each year. We're not alone in this situation. This is a national challenge, and some local authorities have had no option but to declare bankruptcy. The list of councils you're edging nearer to this position is large and sadly growing. The latest finance update that you are about to hear sets out the stark reality that we face another year of multi-million pounds of overspend. And as you will hear, our latest forecast estimates that the authority is on course to spend over 22 million more on the general fund than the amount budgeted for in February. And this is a jump from a forecasted overspend of 12.5 million in the previous financial period. And this does not include a forecasted overspend of 12.5 million, of 9 million plus in the housing revenue account budget, and a further 10 million plus deficit in the dedicated schools grant. The report sets out in detail where our most significant challenges are. Also, importantly, where our efforts are focused to try and alleviate the financial pressures we face. These efforts are critical to our financial health. If the savings we need to make are not being delivered quickly enough, we must face the distinct possibility that our name too will be added to the list of those councils who have failed to endure their financial pressures. Across all directorates in these councils, efforts to save money are ongoing, and it's on those mitigating actions that our financial health rests. Agreed savings need to be delivered. New ideas are required for how money could be saved whilst maximising service delivery, and extra scrutiny of every penny we spend is in place. These are just some of the broad actions being taken. How effective this work is proving remains to be seen, but we are monitoring the progress and will continue to publish regular update reports and expect to have a better estimate of the effect of these programmes in early autumn. If, as we hope, these areas of mitigation are having the desired effect, the prognosis for our financial health improves and our likely ability to balance the budget increases. But no one in this authority should have any doubt of the seriousness of our financial situation and the need to take the actions required to resolve it. I'm now going to hand over to Tony Kirkham to present the report. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the items, the elements which you've highlighted, I'll just put some emphasis on some elements of the report. So, as you said, Chair, the general fund revenue position has deteriorated by some £9.5, £9.6 million since the last time we discussed it at P2 position. Obviously, that is a forecast to the end of the year, and it assumes certain activity being delivered. Obviously, if we can go above and beyond that delivery, as you suggested, Chair, then the overall position may improve. But at the moment, the position in relation to the service delivery would suggest an overspend of 38.5 million, with mitigation from corporate items of 16.2. What you will also see in the paper is there's a risk log and an opportunities log, which on balance shows that there are further potential overheating within the system of some £10 million. If you take those two elements together, if the overheating does continue and we're not able to mitigate the overall position, then we're looking at over £30 million worth of pressures within the system as a potential outturn. The council only has a limited level of unearmarked reserves, which has been set aside for situations like this. And should the forecasts continue in the direction where we have seen to date, then that would mean the unearmarked reserves would be exhausted, and as a result of that we would have to look to unearmark other reserves across the balance sheet in order to provide an overall balanced position by the end of the financial year. However, that would be a short-term measure, and obviously based on risk assessment going forward, we would have to replenish those reserves, which means there'd be further savings to be required in future years on top of continued further pressures which we're anticipating. So it is vitally important that the management actions which we are pursuing and the mitigations which we can deliver in year, and policy committees obviously can consider policies in their areas which may improve the overall financial position. It's vitally important that all of those options are considered. In relation to the housing revenue account, which is a ring-fenced account, we still have overheating in that area, which by the end of P3 was some £9.3 million. That can be offset by working balances, but obviously there is potentially a structural issue there within the housing revenue account, which means it may not be possible for us to meet some of our ambitious targets in relation to the capital programme on the HRA side. The dedicated schools grant continues to overheat also, and again we have the safety valve in place, so we will continue to monitor that and work with the DFE in relation to how that is managed and mitigated going forward. The public health grant, which again is ring-fenced, currently is projecting no variances, and the council's overall capital programme, there are some suggested relatively minor amendments to that, but given the overall position in relation to the HRA, I anticipate the council will have to consider carefully its capital programme in the autumn. Happy to answer any questions when we get to it, Chair, but I think that would do as partly as an introduction.
Thank you, Tony. This report is for noting, but before I list and ask members to note it, I'm happy to open it up for questions or comments. John and then Abdul.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have any magic solutions or a magic wand, I'm afraid, but I would echo what you've said, Chair, and indeed what Tony has said. It is a very, very serious situation, and we really need to pull out the stops, as they say, to see how we can turn this ship around. It is a super tanker, so it's going to take some pulling to get it round, but it's a very serious situation. You read this, it's the stuff of nightmares, I'm afraid, particularly the way that the projected deficit has increased. Clearly we need to get hold of that, a grip of it, and make sure it doesn't go any further, because ultimately we do run out of reserves. It's a bit like an individual with an overdraft. If you keep having overdrafts and you keep dipping into your savings, eventually the savings account is emptied, and it's a really serious situation. Just a couple of specific points. Looking at the HRA, one of the comments was that part of the reason for the overspend or the heating is that we've got quite extensive voids, but I'd have thought as somebody, we have managed an estate for many, many years, and any landlord will know that voids are something to be avoided. I'm not sure why we're getting those voids, whether there's something we could do to speed up our process on that. I don't know if John wants to answer that specifically, then I'll carry on.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the historic, by which I mean in the last couple of years, performance on voids has not been satisfactory and has not been in line with national averages. I'm pleased to say it has improved. So we have been making some improvements, not as quickly as I'd have liked or indeed as we'd forecast. So it remains an area we're continuing to prioritise. It is increasingly difficult, as we've talked about in other forums. We have got a particular requirement to focus on the compliance work in general around the housing and consumer standards work. That is a real priority for us. That said, improving our void turnarounds is financially very beneficial and very good for our tenants as well. So we will continue to prioritise that and hope to improve it further.
The other thing that seems to be causing a bit of pressure are out-of-county placements in the education sector. I know we're slightly reactive there, but we've been looking at ways of avoiding that, trying to get more placements locally to avoid, because some of them are very expensive. So I don't know how the work is proceeding on that, because we've been talking about it in the previous commission when it was called Resources, about Invest to Save. I'm not sure how far we've got with that, because obviously there's a great urgency there, I would suggest.
Thank you for the question. So we do have a programme and earmarked capital investment to increase the sufficiency of specialist provision for children with special educational needs and disabilities. So there's a series of waves of investment that are taking place over the next 4 to 5 years. So there's a programme around that. That also includes the opening of a new free school as well, specialist free school, in the next period as well. So there's some more detail which isn't in this report alongside that, which is about creating more provision locally in Bristol for those children who are currently educated out of Bristol as well.
It's just the timescale slightly worries me, because 4 or 5 years we may have run out of money and we may no longer be able to fund it. So I don't know whether there's any possibility of trying to speed up obtaining more local placements and perhaps challenging the costs of some of these. Some of them are really expensive. They do seem a bit strange.
Agreed. So the investment will see places growing year on year throughout that period. So they won't all arrive at year 4 and year 5. They'll be growing on a scale over that period. So we expect to see the benefits of that. But it is a real pressure in terms of the challenges around specialist provision in Bristol at the moment as well. So something we need to keep an eye on in terms of our capital investment.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Chair. I think I just want to address a point that we've been talking about. Obviously, the Finance Committee regularly we're meeting about the finances. I think we've also at the last meeting of Strategy and Resources we noted this, that there has been this culture of non-delivery of savings throughout the previous years, and with a kind of on average about 60%, 60-70% of a saving culture that's obviously contributed to the current position that we see ourselves in, and obviously the snowballing over the years has created the deficit that we're in currently. It's obvious that previous administrations should take some responsibility for the financial position that we find ourselves in. Currently we have the Finance Subgroup and the Strategy and Resources Committee that are looking at all these savings and forecasts to try and make the situation better. And I do feel that we have to see.
So can somebody answer the more general question about procurement? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. I'm the one-stop shop bit. I'm not quite sure about that title, but what I do know is that there's been quite extensive work in recent times to ensure between children's, adults, and housing to ensure that there's a good supply of general needs housing to support people with particular kind of eligible needs. I do know as a product of that that a good number of units of accommodation, and I don't know detail, please, but I do know that that a good number of units of accommodation are going to be designated for care leavers, which are the people that you're talking about, so people who would otherwise perhaps end up in temporary accommodation. Likewise, for adult social care, I think in the last 2 years we've successfully rehoused somewhere just short of 60 individuals who would otherwise have been in higher level supported accommodation or bedded care in their own tenancies in general needs housing. So I think it's that kind of joined up approach where we're working together to try and identify the areas of need within our service user cohorts in regard to housing, and B, then to use what we've got as a local authority to ensure that that supply is there, ready for them when they need it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not being daft though. We have a plan in place to be able to purchase stock from the, to be council housing, and I thought we had we're going to have an entity to enable us to do that. Whether it be for care or whether it be for homelessness or whatever. I thought we had a...
Yeah, I think Councillor Riverton, we've now worked out what was you referring to. You mean the setting up of a second housing company?
Yeah, is it Gorham 2, is it? Is that...
Sorry, Councillor, I missed my cue there. That was probably for me to come in then, yeah. Yes, so that is something, as you know, it was agreed at Cabinet we would look at bringing forward another subsidiary of the council, which would look at the case for actually holding council housing within that subsidiary. So that business case is coming forward and will be coming forward in the next few months for the next stage of assessment committee. We're also looking at an acquisitions programme, as I think you know, so there was some funding in the business plan, both for a pilot acquisition scheme, which is progressing well, and also for a more general acquisitions programme. So there's some work on that as well, but that will carry on independently of the setting up of the other subsidiary.
So a business plan in the next few months. I think we had a target of 150 acquisitions this year. Did we? Do we have a figure for how many we've managed to acquire so far?
I can certainly give you an update on that. So there's a pilot acquisition programme. So that is looking over 24, 25, 26 at acquiring some 27 homes as part of the HRA, and a further 15 under the single homelessness accommodation programme. So those are on track. So certainly we anticipate we'll deliver that programme within that period. I think what you're referring to is probably the broader, more general HRA acquisitions programme. So the procurement route we chose for that was to expand on the existing pilot programme, which has taken a little bit longer than I'd hoped to get through the procurement process. That has now been completed. We haven't wasted the time though, Councillor, just to reassure you. So we have been continuing to identify the homes, so we've got them in the pipeline ready. So there's some 30 homes that can come forward relatively quickly because we've already done that identification work. But we have only just let that contract, I'm afraid.
Okay, so 30. Do we still have a target for the end of the year of?
Yes.
Of achieving? Are we
to
hoping to achieve our target?
Yeah, I'll happily update on that. So when we reprofiled the HRA account as part of the rebalancing of investment between future homes, delivery future homes, and rebalancing the investment in the current estate, we did take out a significant amount of capital. So the expectation is we won't deliver the full 150 homes. We're still hoping to do in total through both the pilot and the wider acquisitions programme that I mentioned, 75 homes. We will have to keep that under review as part of the HRA review process of the funding that Tony referred to around affordability, however, but we will keep you updated on that.
Okay, thanks. But if we were to deliver those 150 homes, it could provide far more savings in the general fund, which is what we're trying to do here. So, is that's going to be a drag on what we were hoping to save by being able to put temporary homeless people into some of these houses and children in care into some of these houses? Is this part of why our costs are going to increase, or?
So the acquisition programme, the bigger one that you're referring to, is for acquisitions into the HRA account, the Housing Revenue Account. Those are predominantly, obviously, for use in terms of general needs allocation of housing. It is true, as part of the existing policies, that some of those would either directly or indirectly be allocated for temporary accommodation, so there would be some savings associated with that. We baselined a figure within the homelessness account, which we're currently still on track to deliver, but that wouldn't be as much as if we'd got the full 150 on stream at the start of the year, but that was never likely, if you see what I mean, because certainly in this first year of a programme like that, you'd have to build it up over a period. Yes, we're still on track for what we'd originally envisaged in terms of the level of the conversion of those into a general fund temporary accommodation saving, but as I say, we will have to keep that under review.
I'm just going to jump in here a moment as well, Councillor Whippington, because one of the reasons that the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, is a ring fence account. So that means if we have to spend money from one part of the Housing Revenue Account, that has to come from another part of the Housing Revenue Account. As you know, we have had to refer ourselves to the regulator of social housing because we have not been keeping good records of the standard of accommodation that we provide to our council tenants. We have not been providing fire safety checks, electrical safety checks. We have not been monitoring carbon monoxide. We have not been properly monitoring the removal of asbestos from community areas. We are now in the middle of a programme to fix that problem, which we hope to do as quickly and as fast and effectively as possible. But obviously the money to do that needs to come from the HRA account because it is, as I said, a ring-fenced account. And I will prioritise our assisting council tenants' safety. We want to deliver new council homes. It was in our manifesto to deliver new council homes, and we will try to do that to the best of our ability. But we also have to reflect the fact that we inherited a situation where our monitoring of social housing was not to the standard expected by the regulator of social housing. We will keep you informed, and all this committee, and so will the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, on our progress as we go forward. But frankly, you have to accept that there will be some changes to our HRA account because of the situation that we've inherited or have come from as a result of that referral to the regulator of social housing. Councillor Mack, I believe you're next.
Thank you. Just touching on the children and care, because I sat on corporate parenting board. The Welsh Government actually committed to remove profit from children in care, and I feel like that would be a brilliant thing for the UK government to do as well. So I might just look at my Labour colleagues on that one, because we do spend a lot of money on profit-making companies for children in care. On this budget and the situation we're now in, I called out this year's budget as not realistic when it came forwards, which is why my group didn't vote for it. We're talking about missed savings now. We've seen a lack of delivery of savings over the years. This isn't a new situation for this year. Bristol's delivery of savings has been poor. Until we actually saw the books, we didn't quite know just how bad it was, and I guess how many failures we have received from the Labour administration. So we've talked about the housing regulator, failed savings deliveries, the audit failures that we're now facing, and all of these contribute to the budget situation we're in now. When we were setting this budget, Labour painted a pretty picture about our finances and didn't support the Greens in our plans of calling out the Conservative government to ask for more money. They kept being like, no, it's fine, it's fine. And now we have a Labour government who are also not seeing the need to increase local government funding. Last strategy and resources meeting, we agreed to write to the government and lay out the risks to the council tax deduction scheme if we do not get more funding. I guess I hope my Labour colleagues will join me in putting the pressure on their party to fund local government properly from here, looking at the situation we're in, because this is a national picture, it's not just a Bristol picture. Perhaps we can look at some of the Green Party policies, such as a wealth tax that's being discussed, to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Councillor Blake.
I was going to say, Councillor Malik sort of carefully and skillfully tried to blame or put some of the blame on the previous administration and Councillor Max brought a sledgehammer to that approach. Basically, I mean, I will remind my colleagues at the Greens that we did balance the budget for 8 years with significant funding pressures. There's no doubt about it. Local government has faced funding pressures for a long time and increasing demand, right? Those two things are a sort of, part of what local government is. And we want a different settlement for local government. We're with you on that. We need more funding into local government, no doubt about it. But, you talked about previously, coming in and having a new budget, looking at it, proposing a new budget. You also, I think, Councillor Mack, you've talked about having different ideas around the budget. Now, from my understanding is you're still running with the budget previously and you haven't brought in a new budget. And I just wondered why you hadn't done that. But putting that to one side, right, my question was about adult social care. And previously, when the Tory government were facing councils going bankrupt mainly because of adult social care around the country, they put some more money in to adult social care. And I wonder whether or not in our planning we've assumed any additional money coming in for adult social care, or is that a particular area where we may get some relief if the current government carries forward the same type of approach to adult social care as the previous one?
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the previous government did have a number of policy objectives in relation to adult social care, which they delayed on a number of occasions. But some of the forward funding for those policies was allocated to local government and was allowed to be retained by local government despite the delays in relation to those policies. Those social care grants we have factored into the medium-term financial plan. Obviously, we're not aware of the new government's plans in relation to that space, so it is something which we will have to watch as part of any local government finance settlement.
Okay, before I go on to Tom and then Caroline, Councillor Max had a say, Councillor Blake has had his say, so now we'll get back to asking questions of the officers. What I will say is that we have written at the last edition of this Strategy and Resources Committee, I was asked to write a letter to the Labour government, so that's now been done, and there are some conversations ongoing. What I think I will say is we're not expecting any new financial settlement until October the 30th at the latest. So at the moment, it seems unlikely that anything that may be introduced will be in time for us to fix the year. So we may have to look at our own resources to resolve the problem for this particular year. But now I'll move on to Councillor Bleckinsop.
Thank you, Chair. I will take those remarks into account and not comment further on previous financial areas. I was looking over at page 43. Plans are in place to mitigate this position, and the Directorate are in discussion with the Department for Education ahead of the next safety valve return. Now, as has been pointed out, we do now have a new government, one which may be more willing in this area, and therefore I was curious to know how those discussions were proceeding.
Sorry, if I could ask for clarification on the specific areas you'd like me to respond to.
Specifically with regards to the overspend and the safety valve agreement, presumably there will need to be further contribution from the national government, which, what that looks like, I don't think we know at this time, but I'm curious to know how those talks are going, if there has been positive movement with the new Department for Education.
I see. So as you say, Councillor, we are part of Safety Valve, which is a programme over the next 7 years for us as a local authority to reach balance and improvement. In point, any further, I suppose, change in national position or additional funding for Bristol beyond what's been committed from our own general fund and from the contributions from the Department for Education at this point. I think we're acutely aware of the position where the statutory instrument, which I believe is next financial year, if I've got my years correct, 25-26, I think is the year that lifts. So there may be some consideration within the Department for Education as to whether that is the appropriate time for that instrument to be lifted. But otherwise, we continue to deliver against the conditions that are set in the safety valve agreement that's been published.
Okay, thank you. If I can ask one. So we've got the notes as well on the same page. The Directorate on track to deliver 63% of planned savings. Obviously, we have just had the talk about the savings situation. Let me just sort of think on how I phrase this. What concrete, mentions that there are some that will no longer be recoverable, fine, but what plans are in place to kind of try and, I believe the overall was somewhere in the region of 70% thereabouts, so it's a little bit under. Are there any perhaps obvious areas of savings or anything that could be attended to reasonably quickly to try and address the financial issues here?
I think for our work in terms of supporting children with special educational needs, we are, like many other local authorities nationally, seeing an increase in requests to be supported for their education. In terms of, so we are taking, obviously the capital investment is one in terms of capital investment. We are also looking at other areas of policy to think about how we can fund differently, how we can promote inclusion, and there's also a considerable investment from within the general fund to support the service in terms of our work with schools to improve inclusion as well. So there's a number of areas. There's not a quick fix. I think this is part of a broader position that is not unique to Bristol. It's a piece that a number of local authorities are looking at, and we are taking a number of actions which are under the monitoring both internally but also with the Department for Education as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying. I think it is quite. There is a problem around time, I think, with a lot of these, so it's very good to have that clarified. Thank you.
Councillor Gooch.
Yeah, I was just wondering, we haven't got the actual figures in here, but how much are we per child, say, on average, and what's the range that it's costing for out of area special needs placements?
I don't have the exact figure, but on average an independent specialist placement is between about £75,000 and £80,000 per year, and then the transport costs will vary depending on each individual child. So we're often, comparing that to our own local provision where we have that within state state settings such as special schools or resource provision as well, where it is far less expensive to use. What we're mindful of is that balance between meeting those children's needs, particularly when they are younger in their education and where they can't be supported in a mainstream setting, and when independent settings might be the only viable but nonetheless expensive option to meet those needs. And it's broadly similar to the challenge we'll face in other parts of our service in social care, where we have a duty and a statutory duty to meet those children's needs in their education at the point at which we feel through professional advice that a specialist setting is required.
Right, so those are specialist SEN schools outside of areas that are costing that much?
There'll be a range. I'm giving you an average.
Yeah.
There'll be a range of spend that, and that's both an average from settings, independent settings within Bristol, as well as some that might sit outside the city as well.
Right, okay, because my question was going to be, can we use more independent settings and more independent schools in Bristol to fill the need rather than sending children a long way to school? But
I think in answer we do use a number of settings within Bristol. Our aim is to develop our own provision. That is the key
Yes.
for us, and that's the plan over the next 5 years. And with the new free school coming on board, and then working with families in terms of when it might be appropriate to move a child from the current setting to a local provision. For some, they may need to complete their education. They might be in year 9 or 10 and coming nearer the end of their education to year 11. For others, it might be at a key stage point where we can work with families to bring them closer to settings in their community as provision comes online.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Rippington, and then I'll probably speak after that.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. One for you, Chair. I'm just wondering if you agree with Councillor Mack's assessment that the previous administration did nothing to try and convey to the previous government the level of difficulty that we were having with our finances and that we needed assistance, because that's certainly not my memory of the way things went.
Tim, if you can ask me a question like that, I'm probably going to give you a response and ask you a question back. So it's up to you if you want to continue.
I just think that it's an outrageous statement to say that we did nothing to try and convey to the government the state of the finances and that we needed more money. The other question that I'd like to ask is, I'm aware of one situation in the Transport Committee where a decision that was made by the Cabinet prior to the election, which was to raise fees for RPZs, whether people like that decision or not, it was a decision with a budgetary implication, but that decision has never been implemented and is now coming back to committee in September. So by my reckoning, that's 6 months worth of lost revenue in that region. I'm wondering if there are any other similar decisions that we're aware of that have been put on hold, and which have budgetary implications, which mean that we're not bringing in the amount of money that we were expecting to bring in when we set the budget.
Go ahead, and I will respond myself afterwards.
Everyone seems to be looking at me. There are some areas that I'm aware of that going back pre the election, there was opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And now, Tim, I'm going to respond to you. Both Councillor Mack and Councillor Blake, I dare say, and I said we should then go back to concentrating on the matter at hand. You asked if I thought it was unfair that the Labour administration had not asked for any help from government. Possibly it could be unfair. But what I would say is also unfair is that when I took over after my election, this council, to lead this council, I said I was going to lead this council and be as collaborative as possible. One of the first actions I took was to stand up in front of this entire council and the entire city and apologise for the state of play in regard to the failure of the council to ensure that we abide by the regulations provided by social housing. I stood up and I apologised, and you know full well that that happened under the previous administration. I have yet to see a single Labour councillor stand up and apologise to the residents and particularly the council tenants of the city. I look forward to seeing that happening very soon. Thank you. Do we have any more questions for the officers? Councillor Malik.
Just with reference to the overspend on adult social care, with reference to domiciliary care, there's a single framework. What type of effect do you think that the single framework is going to have on the overspend, if any?
Thank you. Yes, I think it'll have a beneficial effect, Councillor Malik. I think we're already seeing, whilst we're only in the first months of it, we're already seeing that the that the pricing mechanism within the framework is enabling different providers to bid at varying levels of price, and we are already seeing some savings that are apparent as a product of that. We're quite lucky in Bristol, unlike many other areas of the country, that we do have quite a healthy supply of domiciliary care in the city, so we're not really in having such a mechanism within our framework encouraging an auction to the bottom, as happens in other dynamic purchasing arrangements. So what we are seeing actually is some quite healthy competition for the work that's available within the framework. So feeling very positive about that.
Just to follow, can I know how people are ranked within that, the bidding process? How do you rank the companies? That, as far as I know, round 1 had 138 odd companies, and there was a round 2 as well. But how do people become competition, and how do the council measure that competition and rank accordingly? What's the basis of that?
Yeah, the primary, there are a range of factors, but the primary factor will be on the price that's being offered per hour of care. We are offering organisations the opportunity to resubmit prices with great regularity. I think we're just coming to the couple of months in, we're coming to the second resubmission moment, so that organisations can resubmit, and then the ranking should change.
And finally, can you reassure members and myself that, number one, that the service will not be compromised for those people that require a high quality of service, but also that the ranking is going to be fair in terms of the delivery aspect of it? So service delivery who wants to serve, whoever wants to kind of bid for the work will be given equal opportunity.
Absolutely, I can. I think we can assure you that it's a fairer system than we had in the past, and that there should be a much fairer apportionment of work around the city, and opportunities for local providers who are up and coming to develop their share of the market and develop their presence within the 3 localities of the city. So I'm very confident that we're going to get a greater diversity of provision, but at the same time, having 100 and X number of providers is probably too many for a city of this size, and so we're looking for people to consolidate and bid in order that we get a more rational number of providers that we contract with.
Sorry, just the last question, if you don't mind, Chair. And in terms of the financial implications or cost savings, I suppose, to the council, what do you forecast this type of exercise would give the council on this particular aspect of delivery?
In year, it's a little bit difficult to predict, because we are implementing it. We're building the car as we drive along, as it were. Well, we're implementing it. But I think in year there will certainly be, amongst the mainstream of domiciliary care provision, savings in the low numbers of hundreds of thousands of pounds. So, £200,000 or £300,000 this year due to the pricing mechanism. That is from an overall spend this year, aside from any specific blocks that we purchase around bridging or for the benefit of the discharge system. Our overall spend is about 25 million, I think 26 million. So it's not huge, but it will make a difference. That said, we're seeing quite significant increases in demand for domiciliary care. So there'll be more domiciliary care provided in the city, I suspect, even though we've got a pricing mechanism that may bring the unit price down slightly.
Thank you, Chair.
Gavin.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Question for Tony, actually. Well, first of all, I've been involved with many public bodies, and they've always had savings targets, and I don't think I've ever seen any public body achieve all its savings targets. Now, that said, obviously it's really important that we get as far to that savings target as possible. I've read through, there's lots of information about our savings in the report. You're relatively new here. What's your assessment of where we are with our savings plans and the stuff that's underpinning it, in terms of the sort of the enablers, that enable us to achieve that savings target? I just wondered what your sort of headline summary is about Bristol versus other authorities.
Thank you, Chair. Most of the organisations which I've worked with over the years have obviously had to deliver savings. That's certainly the way we've been in the last 10 to 15 years in relation to austerity, and some of those can be quite challenging figures. Normally you're looking at an in-year delivery of around about 95%, with about 5% reimagined because policy changes, etc., etc. But that's a sort of mature position. As I said earlier, and as I said at Audit Committee when we looked at this, I think Bristol's planning in relation to the delivery of this is one area we can improve. So by bringing the budget process forward, we're giving officers more time to be more detailed in their analysis and their understanding of what needs to be achieved, and being realistic about an in-year effect versus a full-year effect. So all of the figures which were in the budget process approved back in February were all full-year effects. Now, there was the optimum bias, which sort of offsets, which means in reality that in order to balance the budget you needed about an 80% delivery, but obviously that was compounded by the fact that previous years there was a further 12 million which were carried forward into it. So what we're working together as a CLB to try and achieve is that better planning piece, by bringing the process forward, but also being much more detailed in relation to the delivery plans, timescales, resources needed, etc., and more realistic about if you approve a saving in February next year, what level of impact that can have if we need to change policy, etc. So I think there is room for improvement, and hopefully, what we're putting in place will help with that improvement.
And I think what I just add to that is, when I was chair on audit, we had a report back from the external auditors who expressed concern about the percentages of our savings that were not continuous savings, i.e. they were one-off savings, because even though you may end up with a balanced budget at the end of the year, that's often done by drawing down from reserves, and that means that the percentage of savings that have not been made in that year are passed forward to the next year. Now, when you've got a lot of reserves, it's still a problem, but it's not a catastrophic problem because you've got the reserves available. We've now pretty much exhausted the level of reserves we have. So that's why one of Tony's key pieces of work is how we make sure we get closer to that 85–90% of savings. So then if we do have any deficit left, it's a relatively small one. Okay, do I have any more questions or comments? Okay, with that in mind then I'll call this meeting to a close. Thank you, officers, for answering the questions. Oh, thank you. We do need to note the report. My apologies. Glad somebody is listening. So I'll read out what it is that we're noting, and it is noting, it's not voting for or against, it's just noting, just in case there are any MPs listening. So the committee notes, 1, the Council's General Fund forecasts Outturn revenue overspend of 22.3 million against the Council approved budget at P3 2024-2025. 2, the performance on delivery of savings, which is in Appendix A1, Section 3, Tables 4A to 4B. 3, the additional weighted net risk of 10.5 million per the Risk and Opportunities Register, which is in Appendix A1, Section 4, Tables 5A to 5B. 4, the Council's Outturn position of 9.3 million overspend within the Housing Revenue account to be transferred to the HRA General Reserve, Appendix A1, Section 5.2. 5, the Council's position on its General Reserve and on the Housing Revenue account's General Reserve. 6, that officers are developing productivity plans following the Council Tax Reduction Scheme update and amendment, S&R Committee Agenda Item 9, 15th of July 2024. 7, the Council's Outturn position of a net £10.8 million overspend in the dedicated schools grant following the application of the DfE's 24-25 safety valve, combined with contribution from the General Fund totalling 15.9 million, and at a total of 47.9 million is to be carried forward in the DSG Deficit Reserve, Appendix A1, Section 5.3. 8, the break-even position on public health services, Appendix A1, Section 5.4. 9, the Council's forecast underspend of 6.4 million against the capital programme revised budget 2024-2025, comprised of £7 million underspend on the General Fund and 0.6 million overspend on the HRA, Appendix A1, Section 6. Can I ask members to note the report? Okay, thank you. You are free to go.